Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar about sustainable real estate. I'm Tony Wong, founder of Alaya Consulting. The title of today's webinar is Building Green from the Ground Up. Basically, we bring together a group of industry experts from design, development, financing, ESG assessment, as well as consultancy. We all are aware that buildings constitute a significant portion of carbon emissions, amongst other impacts to the environment. The purpose of today's webinar is therefore to further raise the awareness of the roles that each party has to play in making a low carbon living happen. And only by doing this together, we can be part of the solutions to the targets stipulated under Sustainable Goal Climate Action. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, please type in the chat box. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, the speakers, for joining today. We have MK Leung from Ronald Lu and Partners, Dr. Raymond Yao from Swire Properties. We have two ladies from IFC, Hao Guo and Farida Aji, and Xin Talk from Grabs, and myself. Without further delay, I'll pass the time to MK to start the webinar. Over to you, MK.
Thank you. Let's see how the screen sharing will work. Are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay, good. I understand I have 10 minutes to share on this topic. Green architecture in high density city, and I will talk about some strategies and trends briefly. Myself, I'm MK Leung. I'm an architect. I'm from Ronald Lu and Partner, based in Hong Kong, and we have other offices in China as well. And these are the offices we have in Hong Kong and China. And we have been doing architecture, interior design, and urban planning. We have something like 550 people strong in all our office combined it. And sustainability is always one of the key main key focus of our practice, and we started something like 45 years ago. Today, I will use some of our projects as most of them are completed to illustrate some of the strategies and trends in green architecture. What you see here is some of our projects which have won the awards. Most of them are Grand Awards winner, you see here, of the Green Building Awards of Hong Kong. And the three projects which I will talk more is about the Victoria Dockside and the Airside, which won the Grand Awards last year for the Green Building Awards. And also I will share on projects called the DI, New Campus, which won the award, Grand Award again on the 2014, and also won the Sustainability Awards last year by the Hong Kong IA, the Hong Kong Institute of Architects. Right, before we move on to projects, I would we all know that in order for sustainability strategies to work well, cost effectiveness is always the key. And most of the strategies that we do, we can achieve the best cost effectiveness at the start of the project, meaning in the schematic design, concept design, and the opportunity for more cost-effective solutions actually drops as it move on to the design development and even constructions. But this is quite actually different to probably some of the traditional design process where we put in most resources in the documentations. And we have been trying to work our best to, as a preferred design process, to move that focus further in front of the start of the project. That's why we set up our in-house design team and work with our partners, engineers, and other sub-consultants to work together how we can achieve better holistic solutions at the start of the project. What you see here is some traditional team organizations. We use both for our projects. What you see on the left resemble more the traditional approach where each teams are work in a hierarchical manner, very focused, but some of the most successful projects, the organization kind of framework resemble more like the one on the right, where we work with our sub-consultants and our clients and also other stakeholders on a more lateral basis, where we have to build up the trust, we have to build up the respect to look into what other stakeholders, what other perspectives may shed lights on the projects and work together on focused topic. And it is where these kinds of like a framework or organizations on the right would achieve and be more conducive to better performing buildings. And if we look at the trends of green buildings, I must refer to the World Green Building Council's, the North Star goals. They focus on three aspects, which we probably are all aware are one of the most important focus. First is about climate action. Second is about health and well-being. Last but not least is about resources and circularity. And this actually responds proactively to quite a number of sustainability goals of the UN. And you may refer to the recent paper by the World GBC on sustainable buildings for everyone, everywhere. It just published this month. Using the three focuses, then I will be like to share more about some of the details and some of the work we have been working on. This is the project I mentioned, which won the Grant Award last year by our client is Manfong, and we work with our sub-consultant, for example, Arabs, and to work on a number of very important climate actions. And this one, I would like to focus on mitigations, is the strategies, or the passive design approach by letting in more light for the retail areas for this commercial development, and also how the building mass should be dispositioned to best capture the light and the wind. On the diagrams, which is on the bottom right, which also summarize some of the strategies we use for the active systems. For example, high performance facade EC plug fan, and some of the high efficiency lighting, and also the PV, which is on the rooftop, which with some sizable coverage, something like 15,000 square meters. I should also mention about one innovations. This is, in fact, we work with our sub-consultant Arabs, and Arabs actually developed the Neurons, which is an AI driven building management systems, inform how the building management should be run to optimize the systems by looking at all the data of the running data of the buildings. And we are still hoping and looking at how this will be performing. But from what we saw from the prototype and the studies, I think it appears to be quite a promising strategies that we should be looking for this project and for our future project as well. Besides the air side, the Victoria dockside also look at some similar mitigations project. For this one, actually the Victoria dockside has much more sizable coverage, and the site is much larger. We have a much bigger building mass as compared to the previous New World Center, and different strategies has been used to decarbonize by passive design and also active design and renewable. Some renewable, the BIPV has been integrated into the curtain wall systems. And when we say mitigations, we are not just focusing on the operational carbon, but also the embodied carbon as well. And the bottom right photo is one which I like so much. It is a space where we actually reuse and some of the existing structure and then refurbish it in one of the interior mall space of the Victoria dockside, where we can save some of the existing structure and save some of the embodied carbon as well. Besides mitigations, we must also look at adaptations for the climate actions, where, well, a lot of building permeability, good building separation, setback must be used. And we have adopted a lot of greenery, something like over 30% of the overall greeneries for that projects. And we have also adopted in the outdoor space some active systems, for example, which for that one, the canopy, which gives out mist in a hot summer day, which would be good for handling the extreme temperature of the outdoor area during extreme time. Besides during the design stage, we are also very mindful about how the building should actually be working. And for Victoria dockside, we carry out the pioneer post-occupancy studies to look at all the microclimate measurements we can find for a typical summer day after the building is open. And we find out from the site all these data and then put back into our model to recalibrate our models and see and compare with the baseline and the actual design, how these are changing. And also we ask the occupant their sensation, their comfort feedback as well. And we find that actually it is quite promising. And when we calibrate our model using the actual data, we find out compared with the baseline, our actual design actually does improve some of the major breezeway and some of the major open space. And you can see here. For this one, we work with a few, the Hong Kong U and the CUHK, two universities for this work. Besides the two projects, in the DI projects, we try something new as well. We make use of some of the digital technologies, smart technologies to carry on decarbonizations by trying to change the behaviors of the users. We adopt dasher systems which compare the performance of different users for different departments, and then they compare with their own consumption last week, last quarter, and if it turns out to be a winner, a champion, that dashboard actually will show that real time. And also we have devised a custom-made app where the users can use in some of the classroom and lecture room to do a comfort vote and act as a thermostat. And the systems actually will respond real time to that approach. But if some of the comfort actually is conducive to energy consumption, the setting will stay there. But if it's energy consuming, after a certain while, after the people stay customized into acclimatize into that space, the system actually will slowly go back to the default. So this acts as a certain smart device hoping to drive the carbon footprint low as well. Regarding health and well-being, we focus on active living, and these are some of the examples which we emphasize how people should move around the buildings. And also for the ASI case, we actually promote cycling and by incorporating one of the first of its kinds, the bicycle parking systems in Hong Kong, which it is a very compact systems and it's very convenient to retrieve and to park a bicycle. On resource and circularity, we focus on reuse. As I mentioned, the Victoria Dockside case, we reuse partially some of the basement structure or structure finishing. For reduce, we pay a lot of attention on the finishes, take away false ceiling where it is not needed, which it helps for the maintenance of the machineries and equipment as well. And also, we are very mindful on how to reduce the water consumption and material consumptions in all of the space by putting in a lot of adaptable space for the campus. Coming to an end, I would like to conclude that the three focuses which we have been focusing on, and climate actions, health and well-being, and circularities. And there are some strategies I mentioned. A few cross-cutting themes I would like to highlight in all these focuses is human-centric is always a focus. And when we do the sustainable design, always be mindful of the science base and do be aware that they have to be data-driven during the design stage as well as the verify that and by the occupants occupation stage. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentations. I hope all of you, Mid-Autumn Festival is coming. All of you are health and well, but and also there are many wishes in terms of sustainability. I hope that with the partnering that we can achieve a better future for Hong Kong and for Asia and for the world beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MK. Thank you for giving us such a fantastic presentation on your award-winning projects. The next speaker is Dr. Raymond Yao. I will hand over the time to you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, MK, for your presentation earlier. It's my turn. I chose this topic to share with the audience, sustainable and low carbon placemaking. And let me just have a brief introduction about the company. Let me just sort out the technical glitches. Yeah. Swire Properties, we have a long history in Hong Kong, despite we are a subsidiary firm of Swire Holding. And Swire Property ourselves, headquartered in Hong Kong since 1972. And we are a developer, owner, and operator of office, retail, hotel, and residential properties. And with a particular business model and focusing on mixed-use investment developments, currently in Hong Kong and Chinese mainland, and also with presence in Miami in the US, 2 years ago starting in Singapore, and this year also in Jakarta. And also we started a project in Vietnam this year as well. So this part of the world is actually our family. And currently, in the end of 2019, the GFA gross floor area of all our investment properties is close to 25.6 million square feet, as can be seen, primarily based in Hong Kong. But we are also divesting our investment into hotel, for example, also managing some restaurants as well. In 2016, while we seriously review our corporate sustainable development strategy, and we actually rekindle and fresh up our new strategy, we call it SD 2030. It's an attempt to integrate or embed SD strategy into every facet of our business operation. So with a tall order set out by the Chief Executive, Mr. Guy Bradley, having this SD vision to be the leading SD performer globally by the year 2030. And we, under our creative transformation of our development, we set out 5 pillars helping us to look into this aspect in detail, particularly involving all the stakeholders together into delivering this vision. So we have people pillars, we have partner pillars, we have economic performance pillars, and also environmental performance pillar, all there to deliver exciting places, either through place keeping or place making in the various locations where we have interests. As highlighted earlier or said, we intended to embed SD into every facet of our business operation. So now we have it in the business performances, we have it integrated in our annual budget planning, and even we introduce it into the annual employee performance goal setting. And therefore, every promotion or pay rise is also linked with their individual SD objective set out beginning of the year, and see how the individual person actually deliver the goal. And we certainly incorporate into our corporate register risk. For example, we have investors interested in looking at how we maintain our asset happen to be located, for instance, in the climate risk locations such as Miami in the US. We know the city itself experiencing a lot of climate threat annually, and how we are dealing with asset there, and also in different locations within our portfolio. So we actually upgrade our corporate register risk, incorporate all the climate consideration as well. As can be seen, this will also affect our investment decisions. And later on in the 2017, we find out that our SD approach actually integrate really well with the SD, UN SD goals. So as can be seen, all these SD goals are highly taken into serious account in our strategy. So that also help us to feel that the strategy we set out in 2016 are actually running in the right order. This slide shows our SD governance structure. We do have a very robust and inclusive ESG governance structure. The SD steering committee met every quarter of the year and chaired by the chief executive, who on behalf of the SD steering committee report to the board on all the SD matters. So in other words, you can see it has a really high representation at the board in terms of addressing SD issues. But amongst the SD committee, the members are all the directors and the senior executives of the company, each one of them looking into the 5 pillars. For instance, on the people pillars, the partners, places, environmental performance, and economic performance, and chair or championed by the directors of the company. And each of the pillars, we invite people representing all different fashions of the company, front lines, marketing, technical, or finance people, and in particular, those are the people enthusiastic about SD. As can be seen, most of them are from the younger generation, which they want to play a role. So we have all these more than 100 people representing the company in different facets and being represented in this and come up with strategy, timing, and execution plan. And these are the performance amongst the top SD indices. On the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, we are continued to be amongst the world index since 2017, and also Dow Jones SD Asia Pac Index since 2015. And we are the top in Asia in the world index since 2019. And in the Hang Seng more local stock exchange Hong Kong, the corporate sustainability index, we're top since the 2018, maintained the AAA rating ever since. And also we just received the result for the 2020. We're also top amongst the Hong Kong listed company on the SD performances. On the graphs, since 2017, we're the global sector leader on the other category, primarily mixed-use developments. The company achieved the highest environmental performance assessment scheme rating for all projects under development. And at present, we achieve 100% of projects under development achieve the highest rating, and 97% of all existing buildings are certified green buildings. Indeed, 84% achieve the highest rating. And we have now over 95% of our 2019 GFA was contributed by certified green building system or green building certification. On well, the really important area, making sure our assets are healthy and good well-being. Our recently completed project in 2019, the One Taikoo Place, achieved the final platinum, being Asia the first commercial buildings achieving the WELL final platinum certification. And this two Taikoo Place ramp up to be completed in 2 years' time, and also end of this year, the Taikoo Li Qiantan in Shanghai, which is a retail mall, achieved the WELL platinum pre-certification. Also on the LEED, the final platinum under the LEED E-Bomb, the new version 4.1 Indigo, being the first mixed-use development in the world, and also the Sino-Ocean Taikoo Li Chengdu, also the first open-plan, lane-driven commercial complex in the world. On the green financing, how we can encourage more of this green building development, we look into the green financing opportunity. And these are some of the ongoing green bond and sustainability linked loan initiative that we have undertaken. And since our first certified US 500 million green bond in Hong Kong in 2018, that indeed obtained the Hong Kong QAA, the first Hong Kong Green Finance Certificate. And later on this year, we also launched a few more green bonds of the total of close to 2 billion Hong Kong dollars. On the sustainability linked loan, and last year, we issue or work with the bank to achieve a 500 million SLL, sustainability linked loan, being the first in Hong Kong to launch such a financing mechanism that ties in with the corporate year-on-year SD performance improvement targets. In other words, if we don't perform as we set out, then there will be increase in the interest rate with the bank. But if we do achieve our committed SD performance with the bank, then we can have 50 basis points reduction in the interest rate loan with the bank. And this is how it works. And this year, we also launched 2 more SLL, totally 2 billion in this area. So with this investment and finance available, we were able to do more commitment on a green investment projects to a big way. And this helped us to address green building, the climate change adaptation, energy efficiency, retrofitting of existing stocks, and also consider adoption more of the renewable energy and so on. This indeed have a tremendous positive impact to our future development. At the back of it is largely driven by the fact that as a corporate, we committed to the tall order set out by the United Nations in December 2015 to ascertain whether corporate would join in making sure our decarbonization efforts are up to par in line with the Paris Agreement. So in November 2019, last year, our proposed science-based target was finally approved by the Science-Based Target Initiative, and being the first Hong Kong and Chinese mainland developers committed to the science-based target without approved the target, put it this way. And so we have scope 1 and 2 GHG emission intensity reduction target, 35 and 52 by 2025 and 2030 with respect to the 2018 baseline year. And notwithstanding this, we also have a target to meet in terms of those carbon emissions not directly under our control, scope 3 emission, with downstream lease asset by 28% by the year 2030 compared to 2018 baseline, which effectively affect all our indirectly controlled tenants, either in retail or office tenants. And also capital goods, 25% reduction by 2030 using 2016 and 18 baseline, which effectively affect all our future new developments, either in Hong Kong or Chinese mainland or elsewhere under the investment portfolios. This indeed a very tall order as far as the asset-laden properties, in particular this area. How we are going to achieve it? And we indeed, over the last 10 or 15 years, actually do a lot of decarbonization strategy. We'll continue to do it and work on our existing buildings through monitoring-based commissioning, adopting high efficiency technologies, which we have been doing over the decade or so. We shall need to continue to do so. And as highlighted earlier, our green building certification commitment, a careful consideration of passive design in some of the geographic location of our investment, and certainly to achieve our future target on the capital goods asset, then we certainly need to minimize embodied carbon while very careful low carbon material selections. We developed ourselves a cloud-based smart energy management platform. I think it's first of this kind in developer world for such an extensive application, indeed, to be applied to our global portfolio on cloud-based. So all our portfolios in Chinese mainland and Hong Kong and others location in the future will be connected together through cloud, and we were able to intervene our systems and compare performances and learn from each other and through this smart management platform, energy management platform. And without this, it will be extremely hard to help to achieve the tall order, which I set out and mentioned earlier. And the system actually make use of artificial intelligence, machine learning. All these are developed in-house in Swire Properties with external consultants, certainly, but we knew how to operate a system. So throughout the collaboration, we actually share about how we manage our chiller plant and so on and so forth, and invest on the RE renewable. On tenant engagement, as can be seen on the right-hand side, we introduced a green initiative, green kitchen initiative. We issued technical guidelines. So now we have over 20 of our F&B tenants spreading out in Chinese mainland portfolio in Hong Kong, joining in a scheme commitment to operate the green kitchen and designing in the refreshed green kitchen and so on. So the tenant engagement indeed pays much emphasis because we do also have science-based targets. Let's take a closer look on a case study, One Taikoo Place. And these are some of the measures and design introduced by the integrated team of architects and engineers, achieving on the facade, on the health and wellness, and also the operation. And as a result, we achieved also AAA or top rating, platinum rating, both from Beam Plus, LEED, and WELL, all the final platinum of this 100 million sustainable towers in Hong Kong. And these some place setting and leading system integrated, first of this kind, integrated solar PV and green roof, as can be seen in pictures, both function as a green roof and a PV, and together with the waste to energy biodiesel generation, the system gave roughly about 4.5% RE for the total power consumption of this high-rise building. So we continue to invest and look into this possible strategy for wider adoption. And the embodied carbon of this building, we test out structural optimization. We work out the carbon, which is roughly about 575 kilogram carbon per square meter GFA of this building. That set out a really tall order for a high-rise composite structure buildings in Asia. And we are making use of this reference as guidance for our future buildings, not only in Hong Kong, but also in Chinese mainland. And all this, what I just shared with you, actually get reporting in our SD reporting guidelines report, and also some of this special report we issue representing how we actually creatively transforming the Island East. So all these report can be downloadable from our website. So I don't have time to delve onto too much of this, but I rest assured there's a lot of very useful information for fellow developers and other specialists to review. And finally, sustainability is not just a specialist and not just a design team advising us how our buildings ought to be, or the technical people telling us how to maintain a facility. Is indeed every people in the corporate. Sustainability really all counts. We have this strategy communicating the SD and engaging every single colleagues within the corporate to work on sustainability, be the frontline people, the marketing, leasing, finance, as well as the technical people and project people. So we involve not only among ourselves, but also all the stakeholders in the supply chain and upstream or downstream to help to achieve the SBT and also have a brighter future together. And that's all for my presentation today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raymond Yao. Thank you for sharing the challenges faced by Swire and also, more importantly, the strategies to overcome those challenges. You mentioned about SBT. Well, we will have a quick poll on how the participants of today's webinar think about SBT, setting and tracking science-based target reduction targets. So I hope you all see the poll on screen. So would you please, we've got 30 seconds to do the poll. So select one of the answers. Are we gonna ready to share the results of the poll? Okay, so 2/3 of the participants said it's very important to set and track science-based target reduction target, and the rest, 1/3 thinks is important. So thank you very much. Next, I'll pass the time to IFC, Hao Guo and Farada Aji.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. Let me share my PPT first. Sorry, 1 second. Not very familiar with this one. Okay, so can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, we can
Yes.
see your screen.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay, good. So thank you, Ms. Wang, for the invitation. So I'm Hao Guo, program lead for IFC China Green Building Program. Today, Ida and I will give you a brief introduction on the green building criteria and also IFC Edge tool and some basic knowledge about green building market. So let me share to the presentation mode. Okay, so before, oh, sorry. Where's the slide? Oh my God. Oh, sorry. I just found another slide is missing. But anyways, I also like to introduce IFC. IFC is a member of World Bank Group. We are focusing on some solutions for private sector development. And part of our mission is to create market to support climate business. So here you can see this is our 4-part strategy that includes working with banks, investing directly into building sector, advising governments on green building codes, and also the Edge certification program. IFC also work on building resilience as well. So far, IFC has mobilized at least 5.5 billion US dollars in green building investment from its own account and through syndicated loans. So now I would like to briefly introduce green building market. Okay, so from this picture, you can see building have a significant climate change impact. According to our data, buildings generate around 19th of the world's GHG footprint. It will double in the next 20 to 30 years in developing countries. And 80% of economically viable energy savings in buildings is untapped. Sorry, can you hear me? Hello? Oh, thank you. So I would like to give you a rough number about green building. Green building are 24.7 trillion US dollars investment opportunity by FC green building paper. So in East Asia, that's 16 trillion US dollars investment opportunities with an additional 1.8 trillion in South Asia. So the number we showed here are now does not include developed countries, most in developing emergency market. So green building comprise a relatively small share of global construction, but the market is expected to grow very quickly. So for developers, investors, and the users, increasingly understand that financial benefit for building green. So I see, our message to investor is very simple. If you invest a building today, you could invest a green building tomorrow. So we will show you the investment from brown to green is not difficult as you may think. So I would like to step back to define exactly what we mean by a green building. I believe just now 2 speakers already give you a lot of knowledge on this. So IFC also created Edge in part to answer the need for a common definition of green building that would connect investors, developers, buyers, and regulators. So the building also need to be at least 20% more resources efficient than a comparable baseline building in the local market. Actually, international green building definition agree that a building must obtain a local or international standard of green building certification as verified by an independent party. It is not enough to self-declare, okay, the building has met a standard. You cannot do that. You must be certified by a reputable certification system. So finally, in order to satisfy green finance requirements, projects must have quantified impact reporting, not only on individual project basis, but also on portfolio basis. So I would like to introduce some commercial value on Oh, what happened? Oh, sorry. Just now I may be, so anyways, so green buildings also create commercial value for all stakeholders. Data from mature market shows that green buildings have higher sales prices, quicker sales cycles, lower operation costs, and lower loan default rates. So here you can see the whole structure of the green building market. And I would also like to briefly mention that for owners, actually, I think the green building market mostly will be will be focused by like investors or developers. However, for homeowners, it's still a very important part of this market. The challenges for them are mainly focused on the energy costs. It can be much higher in most countries, especially in East Asia. However, green design can help owners to save money on the utilities every month. So that's why we also want to highlight these market stakeholders. Okay, so just now Raymond also introduced some financial products or financing solutions. I would like to briefly introduce from our angles. Developer finance and green mortgage are the key to unlocking the direct-to-consumer market potential. So the main products used for green building financing are green construction financing or green commercial building loans. The second one could be green mortgage or green home equity loans. Just now, Raymond mentioned that green bonds. I believe in Hong Kong, green bonds will be the most promising approach or solutions for the market. But I think for the others, we can also consider for banks. Offering green bonds will be, I mean, maybe we can discuss later in a separate topic or in a separate webinar. Now, what I want to mention is that what can banks to do offer green construction financing? As a first step, they can learn to recognize the lower risk and offer more favorable terms for loans. Because, for investor, mainly for banks, sometimes they will think this is a high risk, low benefit green products. However, if you have more research work on this market, you will find this is totally different. And then I would like to show you this kind of comparison. Green construction financing is a win-win proposition. So in developed markets, for IC, we have a lot of cases in American market and also South African market. So now I would like to mention that in developed market, green housing projects can command higher sales prices, ranging from 4 to 9% higher, and sell as much as even 3 or 4 times faster. So for commercial building in the US, consolidated economic effect into a building valuation model shows that up to 10% higher value can be achieved from certified green buildings. Okay, so we also emphasize the important role of green mortgage in the market. Besides, why is that? A more efficient building results in low bills. Just now I mentioned this many times. Later I will show you a very simple case. So the owner can afford a more expensive house, and a larger loan result in greater monthly income for the bank. A typical green loan, therefore, is larger than normally approved, also included an interest rate discount to acknowledge the lower risk and the higher collateral value. So I would like to give you a very simple green mortgage example. Here you can see in the left side, this is a standard green mortgage. In the right side, you can see a green mortgage. So similar to green financing, in this case, banks make a bigger loan and collect higher monthly payment. You can see the comparison. So where the borrowers ends up with lower utility, that more than make up for the difference in monthly payment. This is a net positive for both like borrower and also for the bank. So this is a way to understand IFC's offer, ranging from the broad market creation efforts and also working through specific types of advice and final investment. We have differentiated offers for developers, for the investors, and also for governments. I think this is a brief introduction on like whole market and also some potential financing solutions from my side. Now my colleague Ida will introduce some cases that happen with IC and also our Edge tool that help market stakeholders to better understand how to use certification system. So Ida, over to you.
Thanks, Hao.
Oh,
and thanks.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, thanks, Hao, and thanks, Mr. Wong and Alaya for inviting us to speak this morning. So I'm Ida. My name is Farida Aji, but Ida, I am the East Asia Pacific lead for IFC Green Buildings programs. So continuing on what Hao mentions to date, for all the reasons that was mentioned by Hao and also echoing Dr. Yao and also Mr. Leung, IFC to date has invested in green buildings around about $3 billion and growing. And these are some examples of where we do that. Like in India, we partnered with Punjab National Bank on bonds, and then in Turkey as well, green mortgage, well, bonds that does a green mortgage. And then also in Indonesia and Colombia, we issue a green bond, and then the portion of that is earmarked for green buildings, either bonds or, either loans or mortgage. And then also an example from Muscat, where we do advisory support for that, so that they can do green mortgage products. Next slide, please, Hao. Right, and going deeper into the next slide, we'll, these are the examples of Bank Colombia in Latin America, where IFC invested $117 million in 2016, but on their account, they've come up with 400 million green buildings programs. So in 2016, 2017, they started with 0 projects on green homes, but by the end of 2019, they have already 15,000 homes certified as green. This is huge, and they did it by offering various incentives like loans at a reduced interest rate for developers, and then discounted rate as well for green mortgage for the homeowners. Let's go to the next slide, please, Hao. Right. And this is another Colombia. So you can see the spike in terms of the residential units, the green homes in the country. And the homeowners also reported that they save up to $20 in utility bills, which doesn't seem a lot to most people, but I think for them this is really huge significance. And if you multiply that by 15,000 homes, that's a huge impact that's being reported as a savings. Right, next slide, Hao, please. Yeah, and this is we're seeing that in Latin America, a lot of banks are following the steps. They issue incentive to catalyze the market, different ranges of things here. We see that either it comes in lower interest or longer tenor or technical assistance, free certifications, and also Edge, covering Edge technical fees. So a number of valuations that's being offered by banks to incentivize the market. Next slide, please, Hao. Right, and on this one, you can see that Edge is eligible as Edge is listed as an accepted certification standards by all of these institutions. I see that we have a colleague from GRESB here to speak after me. Right, next slide. this is another case. Right. I think we have another one from Punjab first, maybe, how? Before this slide? Yes. So this is a bit more information on what we've done and how we did it how? Next slide, please. Sorry about this technicalities, because I think it's easier for how to show the screen rather than me switching accounts from my end. Right. So this is how we help in India, where we work from the beginning with assessing the market and the potential pipeline for the bank. So we started very, very early, and then after that, we also help them in structuring the investment. We support the bonds issuance, and then the market signals is very good because it was fully subscribed. Therefore, we can say that there is a market investors' appetite for this kind of products. And then after that, we also follow on with training on green criteria and support for developers. So not only we help with the bank, our clients is the bank in this case, but we also work further downstream, working with the bank's clients, which are the developers, in explaining how they should go, or training them on how they can actually understand better how to use the green building certification, in this case IFC's Edge, and building the green projects pipeline.
Sorry, Farida, to stop you. How I think you may have paused the screen sharing. Could you please share it again?
How?
I
Okay.
didn't stop. I just found some misorder for the slides, so I'm trying to find out which one Ida mentioned.
Yeah, Punjab. But maybe is it better if I do it from my end? Maybe.
Yeah, sure. Yes, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry,
let me do
everyone.
that. Sorry, everyone. These technicalities. Right. Can you see my screen? Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Sorry about this. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Is it on Punjab?
No, it's not the PPT. It's
Oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe my bandwidth is also super low. Let's continue using yours.
Yeah,
so
I think
sorry.
maybe let's start from Edge. Yeah.
Okay.
So how, when you click on share screen, actually you'll have the option to click on the PPT. So just try to stop sharing screen and then try to start again. And then you'll have the option to select the PPT. Now you have to stop sharing screen first and then click on the Zoom share screen button.
Can you see?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. We're not very used to Zoom. We're usually using more WebEx and MS Teams. A bit of technical glitches there. So I'll go back to, let's go next to the ODIA. A few slides up. Yeah, this one. So similarly also for in Turkey, we've done this with ODIA Bank. We're following national programs there. We help the clients with market assessment on how they can, be among the first movers in the space. And then we follow that with IFC investment. We invested 81 million in this bank. And then at the back of that, we also provided full support in terms of improving their staff technical capacity on green buildings, because oftentimes this is what we see it's lacking at the banks. Next slide, How. So a few more slides on from our end on Edge. This is to introduce you to Edge. Edge is IFC's owned voluntary green building certifications. So it's available online at edgebuildings.com. Please do go and check it out and play a bit with that. So the value that Edge offers is it's a financial calculators, because you directly on the screen, you can see the incremental costs and then the utility saving, the payback period, etc. And it's also an easy impact reporting, because it also shows the saving in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of megawatt hour, and that. And then the compliance and processing is much simplified, and it's also cost effective. I mean, we're actually considerably much cheaper, I guess. That's because of the simplified process and protocols, and it's something that's backed up by the World Bank Group's brand. Next slide, please, Hal. Right. So on the Edge, I don't want to repeat what Hao has mentioned in the beginning. So there are advantage, of course, benefits for investors. It's really about building market share, the first movers and diversity. And then for investors also, it's about lower investment risks with both developers and also with the home buyers. And then it also can diversify their investors base. And then of course the advantage for the homeowners. Next slide, Hal. Is for home buyers. Next slide, Hal, please. Yeah, for the home buyers, it's really, I think I don't want to repeat it, but it's really about utility bill savings and thermal comfort and hopefully better resale value. Next slide. So Edge is, as I mentioned, is really a software. It's a free software, 24/7, edgebuildings.com. And it has a 20% standard that it has to be met by buildings. And then if the buildings choose to, then they can go for the next process, which is the verifications and certifications. Next slide, Hal, please. So Edge is available in desktop, tablets, and also mobiles. And it's now available in 170 countries across the world. And then within those countries, we also have data coming from different cities. So take Indonesia, it's not just about Jakarta, but it also has different cities in Jakarta. And similarly in China also, it's not just Beijing, but it also has some cities within the countries. And we'll continue to build our baseline from these countries. Right, next slide, Hal. So I mentioned about 20%. So Edge is really focusing on resource efficiency, 20% saving on energy, water, and materials. And when we talk about materials, it's really about energy embedded in the material. So if the buildings can show that they can meet this at least, then they can then go for verifications and certifications. Next slide. Please. So Edge right now is available for different type of buildings, new building, existing, portfolio, and it's also covered homes, hospitality, retail, offices, hospitals, educations, and industrials. And the next slide, there are 3 ways to certify with Edge. So first, the building needs to be at least 20% savings in water and materials. And then once the buildings meet that, then they can choose for energy saving. If they can meet the 20%, then it's we have a standard Edge certifications. And if they can go beyond that, 40% or higher, then they can be eligible for Edge Advanced. And then even higher, they can go to zero carbon Edge certifications. So there are options. Next slide, Hal. And if buildings choose to go through the certifications, we have simplified compliance process, and I mentioned about the kind of a low cost as well. Then they can go for this is the sample of certifications, right? And next slide. Just to mention our partners, which is the UK government and the Swiss government, and then a quick demo. It's not a live demo because of the, I was worried about the internet connection and all that. But very quickly, if you go to edgebuildings.com, and then everybody can sign up for free, just provide your names and emails, and then have an account, and then immediately it will take you to this dashboard, which the first one will give you an options on where you are. Not this one, how, but the slides with the map. So you can choose where your location is and what country. one more. And then you can also, on the left-hand side here, you can see there are types of buildings. So it covers the buildings that I mentioned: residentials, office, industrials, hospital, etc. And then this is the look and feel of Esg software. Again, it's free for anybody to use. And then you can see that up on the top, you can see the a dashboard showing the final energy use, the final water use, the base case utility cost, and then the cost reductions, incremental cost, payback in years. And then if you go right, there are also other options as well. And then a little bit down, then you can see the design, energy, water, and materials. So these are the three things that we look at in Esg. So we don't really include other things because this is all quantitative approach. So we thought that by making it focusing on these three measures, then we can have this approach, calculators and impact calculations and all that. So here, then the buildings can choose, depending on your design, what sort of features do you apply to your building. There are a number of choices here. You can do window to wall ratio, you can do insulations, roof, you can do energy efficient lightings, and so on. And then you see that if once that's chosen, then you can immediately see how the buildings performs compared to the base case. What is the base case? The base case is typical building in your particular city, in your particular country, for your particular type of building. Is it a residential? Is it an office, etc. Right? So you can immediately see what is your improved case in terms of energy saving. Similarly, on water and materials, you can also simulate that at your own pace, at your own time, from your own respective places. So a quick demo here, but I'll stop here. I'm happy to discuss it later. Thanks very much, Tony. Back to you.
Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Hao, for sharing the work of IFC around the world and introduce the Esg software. I'm sure we've got some question on that at the end of this webinar. Before we go on to the next speaker, let's do a quick poll. Oh, actually the poll is after the next speaker. So why don't we hand over the time to Xin Ying from Grabs.
Thank you very much, Tony. Let me just get this up. Great. Wow, very, very rich and holistic views from the ground up, all the speakers that we've heard from today. And for GRAS today, what I would hope to be able to share is really from the investor's perspective, what are investors caring about in terms of ESG in the real estate space, and how do benchmarks and assessments like GRAS that look at the portfolio level of how a portfolio is achieving ESG goals can help the industry really move forward as well as meet the investors' expectations. I think this year, despite the challenging economic environment, we have seen increased interest from investors in ESG funds. And I think today, I hope to be able to shed some light on what are some of the things that they care about. But before that, I'm not sure if everyone has been exposed or has had an introduction to GRAS before, so I'll go quite quickly through that about our history and also how a little bit about how our real estate assessment and benchmark works before I go into how benchmarks like GRAS can help the industry meet investors' ESG expectations. So as starters, GRAS, we were started about 11 years ago in the Netherlands, and we were started by 3 institution pension fund investors who really wanted to understand beyond the financial indicators of their real estate investments, because they were long-term holders and they firmly believed that environmental and social type indicators do affect the long-term financial viability of their investments. So since then, GRAS has been very focused on our mission, which is to provide a set of standardized and validated ESG data to capital markets so that capital markets can actually make the right decisions. So since 2009, the portfolio of assessment in GRAS has expanded. We started with having an assessment for real estate. In 2016, we expanded that to the infrastructure industry, covering now more than 20 different infrastructure types. And in 2017, we also introduced the public disclosure assessment, in which we use whatever companies have already publicly disclosed to assess the degree of information and the quality of information that investors can use based on just their public disclosure. And since then, the number of participants in GRAS has grown rapidly, and this year, the coverage of GRAS represents over $5 trillion in real asset value. But why is this ESG data benchmarking so important to us? I think for GRAS really is the vision that it's the data-driven way of driving positive market transformation. Right? So the data is what really connects the top, which is the capital providers, to the asset managers and the operators. And having visibility of that ensures that we can move everyone in the marketplace together. So very briefly, GRAS as an assessment tool, we assess the full portfolio. So we don't assess at the building level. In fact, we work with all kinds of different building level assessment benchmarks out there. Right now, more than 100 of these benchmarks are accepted within the GRAS assessment as building certifications, including on the Hong Kong side, your own green mark, as well as in Singapore, as well as all Edge, as well as WELL, which was also mentioned just now by Raymond and MK. We also cover both the listed market as well as the non-listed market. So both listed entities as well as infrastructure funds or real estate funds can be benchmarked together with their peers using the GRAS assessment. Our investor membership base have grown since the first 3 in 2009. And now we have more than 100 investors as part of our investor membership base who use GRAS data to make decisions. The most recent Asian investor that joined us was in March this year, GPIF in Japan. In terms of participants, we do see an uptick in recent years. 2019, we had more than 1,000 different entities participate in GRAS. This year, our assessment window closed in the 1st of August, and we can see actually an upward trend as well. There's about 15 to 20% more participation this year than last year. So how does the GRAS assessment work? The starting point of a GRAS assessment is having participants upload the information into our portal. And in this portal, we do multiple layers of validation to ensure that the information that is captured by this assessment is validated. So there is automated validation that is done by the system. There's also a third-party process where they check whether or not the information that has been provided really answers the questions within the assessment. And post-validation, we go through an objective scoring process. This scoring methods and methodology and scoring ways are all uploaded and transparent on the GRAS assessment website. Every year before the assessment window is open, and so that every participant can have a view and also use a simplified Excel model that's available to test what would their scores be. And the last part of the assessment process then is to benchmark to peers. And in the GRAS assessment benchmarking process, we provide a methodology in which we will make sure that the peers that you are grouped together with are as close as possible to the geographical footprint of your own portfolio, as well as the different types of assets that are in your portfolio. So that when you see how your peers are doing on the different parts of the GRAS assessment, you are actually able to gain the useful and relevant business insights. So as I mentioned, because of the objective scoring, the GRAS investors can then use the score to do various forms of decision making within their own portfolio. So for example, positive screening for real estate managers, doing their own due diligence around how well ESG is being covered under the strategy or under the performance of ESG in any of their investees. And also for them, increasingly, they also do their own carbon footprinting, and the type of information that is available in the GRAS portfolio allows them to create some tracking systems around that. So when we interview or survey our investor members, we start to see some trends. This is a investor member survey that was done 2 years ago. We will have new investor member surveys this year as well on why they participate in GRAS. And it's very important to us that the assessment portal is useful to both investors as well as participants from the industry. For them, it's quite clear that they believe that focusing on ESG does increase shareholder value, but also that it becomes an effective communication tool on a topic that is quite far and wide ranging, right? So how do we envision this platform for communication? So given that the information that is available in the GRAS platform is different types and different levels of ESG performance data, that level of analytics then allows the investor to understand what has been going on in terms of ESG in their own portfolio, and then use those information to create positive communication and engagement with their investees. On the other hand, as industry participants, that level of detail and information, especially with the peer benchmarking, allows you to then figure out where you can target or focus your ESG efforts on. Understand also in terms of how the industry is doing, where some of the risks and opportunities are, and be able to, because of the collection of data on a regular basis every year, you can then ensure that you're going through this cycle where you have set some targets, you have done your assessments, you have done your implementation, and then using the data to see if you have achieved the expected impacts that you have hoped to see. So very quickly, an overview of the assessment itself. The assessment is an annual assessment process, and it covers the full range of material ESG indicators in a real estate portfolio or a company level. And when we designed this set of the indicators, we've worked with industry partners, we've also aligned ourselves with responsible investment goals, for example. And over the years, together with our industry benchmark committees, we've also tweaked the GRAS assessment to ensure that it is really moving the industry based on new knowledge and new focus areas on ESG. The GRAS assessment now has 3 major components. The first is the management component, and then there is the performance component and or the development component, depending on the type of real estate portfolio that you hold. So every participant in our assessment is required to answer questions under the management component, which really covers things like the entity's strategy. So for example, Dr. Raymond Yao mentioned about the SD 2030 type strategy. That's why so we'll be asking questions about what strategy do you have to incorporate ESG into company goals, how the leadership is part of that process, whether or not there are some policies and process documents that are put in place to ensure that this goes through the organization, the risk assessment as well as the stakeholder engagement approach that is being used at a company or fund level. And then when we come down to the performance component and or the development component, this really depends on what type of entity you are. So if you are a real estate company or fund that really focuses on just operational assets, you will answer largely the questions on the performance component. If you are a company that really focuses on developing new assets, or you have a really large asset that was undergoing renovation at that point in time that year, you will answer the development component. You can also choose to do both if your portfolio is mixed. So on the performance component side, there are questions around risk management of the portfolio in general, of course, but there are also a focus on performance indicators. So performance indicators of your operational assets, including energy, GHG, water consumption, as well as waste, and also questions around tenant relationships, stakeholder engagement, etc. On the development side, we'll focus more on issues that are during the design and construction phase. So similarly, there will be performance indicators, but the focus will be on the design and the construction of it. I have some more specific details on the different components, which I think we can share these slides later, just so in view of the time that we have, I won't go through them in detail. They are also available online every year at the beginning of the year, sometime in March. We will already upload the different aspects and the different questions, as well as the scoring methodology on the GRAS website. After going through all those questions, what happens? We then aggregate the different scores, the scores around the management component, the scores around performance or the development component, and we add them up together for benchmarking. So your scores will be then placed against every participant in the GRAS model. Based on your quintiles, you will receive either a 1 green star to a 5 green star rating. And besides just the score, participants will then receive, so they receive the scorecard, number one. So you can see where, in terms of score, how you benchmark yourself with the other peers in your peer group, but you also receive a benchmark report. And that benchmark report will then go through every single question to show you how others in your peer group have answered that particular question. And that's where you can gain some valuable insights on what else you can be focusing on in your next step on your ESG journey. So the next part, which I hope is the more interesting part. Just now was a very description of our assessment process, but how do we then use something that comes out of the benchmark to really help the real estate industry meet the investors' ESG expectations? So earlier this year, there was a list of ESG trends from MSCI for 2020. Out of the these are the top 5. The first one is investors are really now looking for climate change innovators. They're trying to use data to find companies that are actually propelling us to a carbon-free economy. So if, for example, whether or not you have net zero goals, or whether or not you have science-based targets, for example, that was mentioned just now, those will be very important to investors. The next trend in ESG is that it's not only just investors now, all kinds other financial providers, including the banks, are trying to bind ESG criteria to their terms of capital. The second, revaluing of real estate. As I mentioned just now, it's no longer nice to have green in your portfolio, but instead, if you are not yet looking at zero carbon plans, there might be even conceptually a discount being applied to your investment. And then so today I will go through, out of these 5, I'll talk a little bit about climate change. I'll talk a little bit about how ESG is being used in loans. I think we've seen some examples just now already. But lastly, I'll also talk about this last point here, where investors really now want to keep score on what they see as a transition towards stakeholder capitalism. So whether or not companies are really walking the talk and how they want to see data be able to demonstrate that they are meeting their commitments. So first on climate change. I think we're all quite aware of the real estate impacts in terms of climate change. 30 to 40% of our GHG emissions come from the buildings because we live and work in them. And so an important part of it is to figure out what some of these decarbonization pathways are for the real estate industry. So GRAS together with institutes in Europe have started what we call the Decarbonization Pathways. This started a couple of years ago with European countries, and now the Decarbonization Pathways are now available for Asian markets as well. On top of decarbonization, I think it was mentioned just now in terms of climate risk to physical assets, because our real estate are fixed assets in different locations around the world. So GRAS has also then now created a climate risk platform where by filtering your property type and where your location is, we can help to identify what type of climate risk your portfolio is most exposed to. And this allows you to start exploring the partners that you might need to bring into play when you are designing your resilience strategy. And resilience, for us, just wanted to mention that the GRAS assessment, starting from next year, 2021, will incorporate mandatory questions on resilience as well. And this is a result of a 4-year development process that has started, where we have introduced voluntary questions on resilience and have our participants answer them and understand what kind of indicators are the most relevant to the industry in this space. Next is on ESG-linked financial products. As I think it was mentioned just now that there's a trend in terms of sustainability-linked loans and some interest rate preference for performing well on ESG. But we've seen that being used together with the GRAS performance score as well in Asia. We've also, GRAS also works together with ICMA to help develop the real estate guidelines in the Green Bonds Principles. And last year, we've also seen Asian investment entities use GRAS as a reference point for their Green Bond Framework. We've also worked together with indices to ensure that ESG is part of the process in terms of providing different weights to the component stocks of the different indices, both at S&P and this year with Nikkei. And then lastly, in terms of keeping score, over the years, we've seen a big drive towards getting asset level data from our GRAS investors, as well as the provision of such data by our GRAS participants. About a quarter of our assets, so about more than 25,000 assets, report every single asset level data that GRAS requires. And that has actually allowed us to do some in-depth analysis. So for example, one of the analysis we can do is whether or not the GRAS portfolio is meeting sustainable development goals in energy efficiency. So we can see that in the earlier part, 2010 to 2018, the GRAS portfolio energy efficiency curve was actually deeper and steeper than was what is required by the UN SDG goal 7.3. And then if we start looking at the targets that's being set by the GRAS universe, we can also see that beyond that, we might be missing the target by a little bit, right? So as this goes, as more and more participants set different types of targets, including absolute targets or intensity-based targets, we can see this curve improve along the way. Lastly, we can also do some comparison in terms of the year-to-year improvements of the GRAS portfolio in terms of energy consumption, GHG, water and waste. We can see that in Asia, actually, we are making headway in terms of energy and GHG reduction, but we might have a little bit of a challenge with regards to water consumption. So I think that's all I'll be sharing today. I will look forward to questions from the group.
Thank you very much, Xin. Thanks for sharing in-depth introduction of GRAS methodology. Well, let's do the last poll. Shall we show the poll, which is about how do you rate the importance of ESG ratings to evaluate the sustainability performance? I think in this particular case, real estate companies. So we've got 30 seconds. Please select one of the options. Sunny, you can show us the results when it's ready. Right. Yeah, I think all participants think it's important to varying degree. 45% thinks it's very important. 35 thinks it's important enough to take into consideration from these ESG ratings. Okay, without further ado, I will conduct my last presentation, which is today's last part of the presentation. Okay, so I will be focusing on TCFD, setting SBT, as well as advancing net zero. Just a brief introduction about Alaya Consulting. We've been in the market for 6 years, advocating industry best practices through training, providing assurance, and organizing ESG reporting award with independent judges. Now we are also in Shenzhen, China. Although we have a small scale operation, we want to demonstrate to our clients the commitment that we made on tackling climate change by becoming the first ESG consultancy in Asia with an approved science-based target and committing to net zero emission by 2050. So today we've got 3 companies in Hong Kong who have the science-based target approved, us, Ronald Lewis and Partners, as well as Swire Properties. So in Alaya, we advise our clients for a full suite of service concerning carbon strategy and disclosure, from aligning with TCFD recommendations, GHG disclosure, setting and tracking SBT, through to enabling carbon reduction and carbon neutral. I'm sure most of you have heard that Hong Kong Stock Exchange has required all listed companies to disclose requirements stated in the new provisions of ESG reporting guide. Companies with financial year ended December 31st, they will need to start collecting and preparing for information and data. So combining the mandatory disclosure requirement about the board statement and the A4 climate change disclosure, as well as setting carbon targets, In Hong Kong, we have a pretty similar framework as TCFD recommendations. And after today's webinar, I'm sure all of you understand that decarbonization, the buildings and construction sector is critical to achieve Paris Agreement commitment and the SDG because it's responsible for almost 40% of energy and process-related emissions. So taking climate action in buildings and construction is among the most cost-effective, and that's the very reason why we have today's webinar. TCFD is probably one of the most talked about subjects for the past 18 months. In Alaya, we have been advising our real estate clients by integrating climate risk into their enterprise risk management framework, identifying risk and opportunities brought by climate change by conducting scenario analysis and reporting Scope 1, 2, and sometimes Scope 3 GHG emissions and setting science-based target. Initiatives such as CDP and DJSI and also GRABS have been increasingly incorporated TCFD into their evaluation target. And earlier this month, New Zealand government has made it the first in the world to require its financial sector to report on climate risk on a comply or explain basis based on TCFD framework. And I believe we will see more and more development like this. This slide here shows the climate-related risk. We all experience physical risk to a certain extent, brought by extreme weather and rising sea levels. Equally important is transition risk. For example, just last week, China's President Xi has pledged to go carbon neutral by 2060. Real estate developers who are not embracing this kind of change are bound to suffer from this transition risk. So TCFD believes scenario analysis is critical for understanding a company's strategic implication of climate-related risks as well as opportunities. And based on the results of these scenario analysis, company can adjust their current strategy to improve the adaptability to future changes. And we have been advising our clients to conduct this scenario analysis, and especially this year, we are trying to take a step further ahead. So setting science-based target has been picking up the pace for the past 12 months as well. In Hong Kong, Swire Properties has approved SBT, and I'm aware quite a few other developers have decided to go ahead with the process of setting their own SBT. So just briefly on SBT, it is a target that is in line with the level of decarbonization required to keep the rise of global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. So I have to say there are multiple benefits for setting SBT. Just to name a few, first, it is under the comply or explain provision. Second, it complements with TCFD and CDP, as well as other sustainability indices and ratings, which investors are increasingly concerned. Third, it enables the company to genuinely contribute to the targets set by SDG climate action. Globally, we've got 30 real estate companies with their SBT approved. In Asia, as the screen capture here shows, only 7 real estate companies have got their SBT approved. This slide, I'd like to show you the summary of those 7 real estate companies in Asia, their approved targets, as well as the time frame to achieve these targets. Setting SBT requires not only a deep understanding on the GHG protocol, it also requires an in-depth knowledge of the company's source of emissions. This slides, we have summarized the key learnings from our own experience. First, there are a couple of key decisions that you need to make. For example, selecting accounting approach, especially if you have multiple locations of operations. Second, most of the staff have experience in dealing with Scope 1 and Scope 2 data, but not Scope 3. So a clear briefing has to be conducted so that everyone is on the same page. Third, Scope 3 screening exercise would be the most challenging task during the process, because in my experience, cutting Scope 3 emissions is the most difficult. And that brings me to the last point. It is critical to understand the expectation from Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTI, because your target has to be approved by the institution. So in my last part, I would like to touch upon a hot topic recently, advancing net zero. Well Green Building has been advocating all new buildings must operate at net zero carbon by 2030, and by 2050, 100% of buildings must operate at net zero carbon. Just earlier this month, SBTI has published this document, Foundation for Science-Based Net Zero Targets Setting in the Corporate Sector. Basically providing an initial conceptual foundations for science-based net zero target setting, as well as clarifying the role of decarbonization and offsetting. We are expected to receive the final guidance from SBTI next year. So these are the 4 principles to advancing net zero, which is pretty self-explanatory. What I really like to conclude as the final takeaways from my session is, to advance net zero, you really have to analyze your own climate-related risk of the business group, adopt net zero standard in building design and construction. Third, embrace green procurement in sourcing upstream capital goods. And lastly, which is most often got forget by the practitioners, is to engage supplier on setting carbon reduction target. That's all for my part. I would like to open to the floor for questions. If you have any question to any one of our partner speakers, please put it in the chat box. And we've got a questions which is for all speakers. And the question is how to ensure the company's efforts in ESG be effectively communicated to all internal and external stakeholders, including employees at all levels and investors. Any speakers who would like to tackle these questions?
I may have a go, Tony. Ms. Raymond.
Yep, please.
I think earlier on in my presentation, I have included a Esg Governance structure slides, which demonstrate a robust and inclusive governance structures be needed. So that top-down and also seeking views from bottoms up, both essential paths. So, getting engaged your top executive interests and seeing importance and getting buy-in is really important. Usually for corporate, the sustainability manager might have these ideas and he needs to really talk to the top executive and get them buy-in. Once they buy in, make them to play an important role. And then so once the top executive actually buy in, then he or she could actually get together a good governance structure, ensuring the messages will be disseminating downward. And so I think that's really important, and everything will follow through, basically.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Raymond Yao. I've also remember in Swire Properties, in your PPT, there's a performance-linked assessment. So this may also help enable more buy-in from the operating management. Right. So there's another questions for Ms. Xin Ying talk. How extensive is the application, and do companies apply themselves or have external consultants?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So the GRAS assessment coverage and scope of questions is quite wide. And it really depends on how your company or your fund right now has managed to already have an infrastructure to collect information around ESG. As we, in the Hong Kong market, ESG reporting to Hong Kong Exchange, for example, has already been going on for a few years already. So with an existing data collection infrastructure in place, you might not require external consultants. However, I think that from the GRAS perspective, there are, for entities that this is their first step in terms of looking at ESG disclosure, it might be useful to speak to different consultants to be able to understand where your starting points can be. So for example, how do you design a way of looking at strategy? How do you engage the different stakeholders internally? As Dr. Raymond Yao mentioned just now, how do you engage upwards as well as downwards within an organization? I think a lot of that can be useful through the support of external consultants.
Thank you, Xin Ying. For Mr. M.K. Leung, thank you for your insightful presentation. My question would be, what sort of benefits / values have Ronald Lu and partners noticed after setting SBT?
Thank you for the question. As a consultant company, we are interested to set up SBT for us because we would like to walk the talk, of course. For the operations, we do have a modest scale for our operations. We have 5 offices in China and Hong Kong. And by setting up SBT, we managed to conduct a lot of dialogues, again, from different levels, from the management, which set up these visions and commitments, and also down to the operations and working level, where we need to collect data for each and every of our operations aspects and practices. And in fact, it does inform and update our environmental protocol when we do our ISO management. And also for the each and every staff, this message actually distill better because we ourselves actually has been in the practice in the industry for quite a long time, and all our colleagues actually even before joining us, they are quite aware of our positions in sustainability. And we do hope that that kind of momentum and passions pass on to each and every colleagues when they are really well, down to earth, knowing that each and every actions of us actually is concerning about how future ready we should be. That kind of mindset actually translated to how we practice our work for our clients as well. So I think it moved beyond how much or how many tons of carbon we actually save, but actually it speaks to the mind of all our people.
Great. Thank you very much, MK. I'm conscious of the time. Maybe just a last question for IFC. Hao and Ida, you mentioned the Edge software. Would you mind to introduce a bit more, or talk about how IFC's initiatives in this part of the world, Asia, and your future outlook about enabling green financing?
All right, thanks very much for the question, Tony. Maybe I'll start off, and Hao, please jump in. So IFC, again, as part of the World Bank Group, we embark into this initiative because it's our mandate to help our countries, member countries, which are 190 countries across the globe, especially the emerging economies, to also be actively participates in the climate change aspects, right? So this is why we develop Edge with that in mind, but we also, because our involvement in investment, we see that we have to have the impact shown, right? So it's not, it's all good for the planet, for the people, but it's also have to be good for business. That's why IFC's developed Edge with that in mind. So the software, again, it's on edgebuildings.com. It gives the calculations on those parameters, on the GHG emissions, on the megawatt hours saving, on the liter of water saving, but also in terms of the incremental cost that is involved, and the payback period, and the utility savings that the tenants can reap from having a more green buildings design in place, right? So with that in mind, we developed that. And to your point, Tony, right now we're pretty much active in emerging markets. It doesn't mean that we're not active in developed countries. We have covered 170 countries, but in terms of like having technical assistance, helping them with the simulations, with the trainings and all that, we are more active in emerging markets, so that there will be much more push towards that. And I think when we come up, we really want to complement the other ones that's already out there, the other certification for green building. With Edge, there are certain niches that we can cover better, maybe to complement the offering that is out there. So maybe I'll stop there and see if Hao has additional.
Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Ida. So I think, Ida, you covered the most key points that IFC offered. So just I mentioned just now, IFC offer differentiated solutions to different stakeholders, like for investors, for developers, and also for some other stakeholders. But now we actually provide financial institutions, not only banks, all kinds of financial institutions to design green products that include green building. So I think going forward, because all of us can see the vast opportunities in the green building market, so I think maybe we can work together from different angles. And just now, I think Raymond or MK mentioned that like ESG, we also have a special unit to work on the ESG standards and also relevant markets. So I think maybe we can help connect you and with our Esg department to understand more about the standards or some other system. So that's what I want to add it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hao and Ida. With that, I would like to conclude today's webinar. Thank you once again for the speakers joining us today. I think it's a very critical issue, and climate change. By working together, we can, contribute to resolving this global issue. So let's have lunch and have a wonderful Mid-Autumn Festival.